Today's lesson is Biomimetic Architecture, Nature-Inspired Design. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we are going to continue talking about biomimetic architecture, which is architecture that is inspired by nature. We look to nature for examples, and then we use their ideas to build buildings for ourselves to solve these complex human problems. Now, last time we talked about an example in Australia. We talked about the Council House number 2 in Melbourne, Australia. What exactly are they doing down there?
They're copying termites down there, apparently. Termite mounds, of course, famous for being large and solid and built by tiny little ants, are also apparently very efficient in cooling and heating themselves. Termites clearly are not buying air conditioners and paying power bills every month, so they have to design ways for air to flow around the termite mound, keep it cool in the summer and warmer in the winter time. And that is the kind of idea they used on this council house, this government building in Melbourne, Australia. They're trying to heat it and cool it as efficiently as possible using nature as much as possible and not burning a lot of fossil fuel or using a lot of energy with air conditioning systems. So I imagine there's a lot of open space and the air can kind of flow in and flow around during the summertime and keep the building nice and cool with very minimal machines running to aid in this process. So today we're going to come actually a little bit closer to home. To begin, we're going to be down in Kaohsiung, checking out the Kaohsiung Music Center, which also apparently has a design inspired by nature, or it's a biomimetic architecture building. So let's find out all about it.
Biomimetic architecture can be found around the world. One well-known example in Taiwan is the Kaohsiung Music Center. The center features forms that mimic elements of the ocean environment, such as coral reefs, dolphins, and waves. The design makes highly efficient use of natural light, reducing the need for artificial light sources.
大家好，第一部分介绍形容词 well-known， 意思是著名的或是众所皆知的。例如 A well-known actor lives in the apartment next to me. 有一名知名演员住在我家隔壁的公寓。或者 University of Oxford is a well-known university. 牛津大学是一间众所皆知的大学。接着看到 coral 这个单字，它是名词，表示珊瑚。例如 Please remember not to touch the coral reefs when you go diving. 请记住潜水时不要触摸珊瑚礁。或是 The clownfish live in the coral reefs under the sea. 小丑鱼生活在海底的珊瑚礁中。再来看到形容词 artificial， 意思是人造的或是人工的。例如Sun Moon Lake is a natural lake, not an artificial one. 日月潭是天然湖泊，不是人造湖。也可以说 They used artificial flavors to enhance the taste of the food. 他们使用了人工香料来增添食物的味道。
Okay, so again, we're talking about different examples of biomimetic architecture around the world, and biomimetic architecture can be found around the world. And one well-known example in Taiwan right here is the Kaohsiung Music Center, as you said. If something's well-known, it's famous, and I think most people in Taiwan know about the Kaohsiung Music Center. And the center features forms that mimic elements of the ocean environment, such as coral reefs, dolphins, and waves. So I assume they're talking about the forms of the actual theater where the music is performed, maybe the shape of the walls or whatever, or the shape of the building or whatever. They mimic the features of things in the environment, in the ocean environment, specifically coral reefs. Okay, coral is that hard stuff that's under the ocean. Of course, the Great Barrier Reef is the most famous coral reef in the world down there in Australia. So it mimics the shape of a coral reef, and it also mimics dolphins because they kind of have sleek bodies. They're kind of very aesthetically pleasing bodies as they go quickly through the water. And of course, they are inspired by waves from the ocean, which you will see a lot of down there in Kaohsiung.
Very cool. So all these ideas and concepts and designs and inspirations taken from the ocean. And of course, since the Kaohsiung Music Center is down in the port, this all makes sense and it makes it look very attractive. But as we go on, it also says the design makes highly efficient use of natural light, reducing the need for artificial light sources. So in the same way that the building in Australia we looked at yesterday uses termites to help it with its airflow, to help with cooling and heating, this building in Kaohsiung uses designs from the ocean, from the sea, to use the light in the most efficient way, thus saving money on electricity bills as well for lighting. So I'm imagining a lot of skylights, a lot of windows instead of ceilings overhead and things like that. So natural light, of course, is light that comes from the sun. And to make use of something is basically to use something that is around you to take advantage of something like that. So highly efficient use of natural light, I imagine. So this reduces the need for artificial light sources. When we think of artificial light, we're thinking of electric light. We could also include candles or lanterns if we want to go back in time a little bit, but basically anything that provides light that is not from the sun.
Right, it's made by people, artificial. You might have artificial flavorings in your food, for example. They're made in the laboratory. And yeah, they don't need to use light bulbs or electric lights there when they use the natural light. Okay, we're at the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's listen to the second part and go on to my mother's hometown, Milwaukee.
The Milwaukee Art Museum's Quadracci Pavilion in the U.S. likewise employs biomimicry to make better use of natural light. Specifically, the pavilion is topped by an enormous pair of steel bird-like wings that can be opened or closed to regulate the amount of sunlight entering the building. The Eden Project in Cornwall, England, is another notable example of biomimetic architecture. The project's large domed greenhouses efficiently house different plant species from various climates. The greenhouses are similar in structure to soap bubbles, and were made using a special material that's lighter and stronger than glass. This design allows for maximum strength and surface area with minimal materials and weight.
"第二部分介绍形容词 enormous， 表示巨大的或是极大的。可以说 The earthquake caused enormous damage to the city。地震对那座城市带来巨大的损害。又或者说 The impact of the pandemic on the economy was enormous。那场疫情对经济的影响很巨大。继续看到动词 regulate， 表示调节、控制、管理或是规范的意思。例如 Donald takes medicine to regulate his blood pressure。 Donald 吃药以控制他的血压。又或者说 The government regulates the age at which teenagers may begin working。 该政府规范青少年可以开始工作的年龄。再来我们看到 minimal 这个单字，它是形容词，指极少的、最小的或是最低限度的。举例来说 The aircraft suffered minimal damage during the accident。 这架飞机在事故中没受到什么损害。又或者说 The chef used minimal ingredients to highlight the natural flavors of the dish。 该主厨使用最少的食材来凸显这道菜的天然风味。
The Milwaukee Art Museum's Quadracci Pavilion in the U.S. likewise employs biomimicry to make better use of natural light. So in the same way that the Kaohsiung Music Center uses large windows and things like that to use natural light in the most efficient way possible, over there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA, the Milwaukee Art Museum's Quadracci Pavilion in the U.S. likewise, or in the same way, employs or uses biomimicry. There we are. We're talking about biomimetic and architecture, that is biomimicry, copying from nature to make better use of natural light. So how do they do it down there in Milwaukee? And before we get to that, have you actually been to the Quadracci Pavilion?
No, I haven't. I have been to Milwaukee before. My grandmother used to live there before she moved away, and then later on she passed away. So I don't really have any reason or excuse to go to Milwaukee anymore. But hey, I'd like to find an excuse to go to Milwaukee to check out this Quadracci Pavilion. And yes, indeed, it employs biomimicry to make better use of natural light. I wonder how they do that. Well, specifically, to give you some specific or exact information, the pavilion is topped by an enormous pair of steel bird-like wings. Okay, you'd have to look at a picture to see exactly what this looks like, but we've got these things that look like wings. They're not exactly wings, but they sort of look like wings. They're bird-like, and those those wings are enormous, which means they're really big, they're huge, and I guess they can be moved. It says they can be opened or closed to regulate the amount of sunlight entering the building. So if they want more light, they open up the wings, and if they want less light, they close the wings.
Very interesting. So this is sort of like those retractable roofs we often see over sports stadiums, right? Those are retractable so that they can either play outdoors or they can close it to block out the rain during bad weather. Well, this is using the same idea, but they're opening or closing them to regulate the amount of sunlight entering the building. And of course, by regulating the amount of light, they are controlling the amount of light. And that's basically what regulate means. Governments have laws to regulate the behavior of people, the things that they do. You can use a remote control or a thermostat to regulate the temperature in your room, right? If it's too hot, you turn up the air conditioner. If it's too cold, you might turn it down or set it at a higher temperature or something like that. In the same way, in a car, you could think of the gas pedal in your car or the throttle on your scooter, that thing that makes it go faster or slower, the brakes as well. These help to regulate the speed that you're driving at, to control something and give you a fairly efficient amount of control over it. So here we're regulating or controlling the amount of sunlight. Natural light is basically sunlight. That's what we saw in the first paragraph. When we say natural light, we mean sunlight, light coming from the sun. I suppose you could throw moonlight into natural light as well, but of course, since the moon is just reflecting light from the sun, and also the moon doesn't really provide that much light, often when we say natural light, we mean, sunlight, light from the sun. So these wings basically act as almost like an umbrella holding it over your head to block the sun from you on a hot day. And then if the sun goes down or the temperature's not too bad, you can remove or take down your umbrella. And I guess they can do a similar type of thing with these wings, which also seem to serve as the roof of the building in some way.
Yeah, I can imagine it has sensors or something like that to detect how much sunlight there is, and therefore it closes and opens the wings as needed. Now we're going to go to England, and we're going to go to Cornwall, England, which I believe is in the southwest part of England. Yep. Do I get that right?
Yep,
okay.
Southwestern tip.
Okay, yeah, way down there at Land's End, I believe. And the Eden Project in Cornwall, England is another notable example of biomimetic architecture. The project's large domed greenhouses efficiently house different plant species from various climates. Okay, as you know, the English love their plants, they love their gardens, so it's not surprising they have developed something like this there in England. It's an example of biomimetic architecture, and it's got these large domed greenhouses. Okay, a greenhouse, of course, is a room that keeps things warm inside during the winter. The light kind of shines in from above and it's trapped inside, just like the greenhouse effect, which they believe is causing global warming. And these greenhouses can house different plant species from various climates. So they can have different plants in these greenhouses from different parts of England or from different parts of the world. And these greenhouses are not square like a normal room, but they're actually domed, which means it's like a half sphere.
Exactly, a half circle. So imagine the roof of the House of Congress, the House of Representatives, in the Capitol building right there in Washington, D.C. You can also think of St. Paul's Cathedral there in London. Also, the Vatican in Rome has a domed roof, St. Peter's Basilica. And, of course, the very famous Pantheon there in Rome as well. An old Roman building. I think the Romans were the first people to use domes. So basically take a ball, cut it in half, use that half ball as the roof of your building. You have yourself a dome there. So if something is described as being domed, it has that half-rounded shape that we often see in some of those buildings. And this will efficiently house different plant species from various climates. To house something, notice how we're saying house and not house. When we use this as a verb, we're basically talking about giving it a home or a place to live or a place to be located. Where you put something, you house that. People might house their cars in their garage or something. So it's not always just people, but we have a place for this to be. We have a place to put this. We are housing it in a certain place, as in giving it a home. So have these different plant species from various climates. So this is kind of like a zoo for plants, a botanical garden, you might call it. It says the greenhouses are similar in structure to soap bubbles and were made using a special material that's lighter and stronger than glass. So if you look at the Eden Project buildings, it has a similar structure to soap bubbles. Imagine a bunch of bubbles all clustered together there. If you're washing your hands or something and stop for a moment, you might get a bunch of bubbles kind of sitting in the palm of your hand. They're all rounded, but they're also connected. So they're not maybe individual bubbles on their own. It's sort of this network of bubbles or this sort of cloud of bubbles that you might have. And that is what the Eden Project kind of looks like. To me, it sort of looks like what I imagine a moon base or a Martian colony will look like in a science fiction film or possibly in the future. But these were made with a special material that's lighter and stronger than glass. That's amazing. Clearly, it is efficient enough and strong enough to serve not only as the windows that the light comes through for the plants, but also serves as the walls and ceiling and basic structure of this building. I think it's known that bubbles and that kind of shape in nature are quite strong, right? They kind of reinforce themselves by spreading out stresses and loads and things like that. And that's where the design came from nature. The inspiration came from.
Right. So again, it's stronger than glass. It's lighter than glass, so that's very efficient. And this design allows for a maximum strength and surface area with minimal materials and weight. So they don't need to use a lot of materials to make those domes. Therefore, they're kind of light and they won't collapse very easily. And those plants will be happy inside those greenhouse domes. And again, that's a lesson from nature. So now we're going to wrap things up with the final paragraph here. Let's listen to it.
These innovative examples show the amazing potential of biomimetic architecture. By putting inspirations from nature into practice, it enables the creation of beautiful and sustainable structures that people can enjoy for years to come.
第三部分看到形容词 innovative， 指创新的、新颖的或是富有革新精神的。可以说 Many innovative designs were on display at the Tech Expo. 许多创新的设计在那个科技博览会中展出。也可以说 Mrs. Jones is known for her effective and innovative teaching methods. Jones 老师以她有效及创新的教学方式而闻名。
Okay, so here in the final paragraph it says, these innovative examples show the amazing potential of biomimetic architecture. Now, here we've got the word innovative, which means new. It hasn't been done before. I've heard this word pronounced innovative. I think some people in England pronounce it that way, but the North American pronunciation is innovative. And these are examples that are new and exciting, and we haven't heard of them before. And they do show that there is a lot of potential with biomimetic architecture. Imagine what else we can learn from nature and what we can build with that information.
By putting inspirations from nature into practice, it enables the creation of beautiful and sustainable structures that people can enjoy for years to come. And if we can lower our greenhouse footprint at the same time, well, more's the better. But yes, this is what architects are doing. They're putting inspirations from nature into practice. If you put something into practice, that's kind of like taking a concept or a theory and actually using it in the real world. That's what kind of engineers will do, right? The architects, the designers, the scientists might think something up as an idea, as a concept, as a new material, but it's the engineers who will actually have to make things out of them and make sure that those things actually work in the real world. They're taking an idea and using it. They're taking that theory and putting it into practice. So by doing that, it enables the creation of beautiful and sustainable structures. These are both aesthetically pleasing. They're lovely to look at to the eye with very interesting, lovely shapes, and they're sustainable. They're really good for the environment, and they will continue to be efficient into the future. They will allow us to have lower greenhouse gas emissions, lower power bills, and things like that. And so hopefully people can enjoy these and many other buildings like it, many other biomimetic buildings, for years to come, for a long time into the future. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be nice indeed, and something that would be even nicer would be the opportunity to listen to Dear, Dear Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分有提到英国康沃尔郡的伊甸园计划，它的大型圆顶温室有效地容纳了来自各种气候的不同植物物种。文中用到 dome， 它的过去分词来形容圆顶状的。那么 dome 当动词呢，它是指使成圆屋顶，或者是加圆顶于什么什么上面。它当名词则有穹顶、圆屋顶或是圆顶状物等等的意思。其实啊，在中世纪的时候，像德文的 dom 和意大利文的 duomo， 它们是用来指大教堂。那我们知道大教堂建筑常常会有圆顶、穹顶的构造，后来英文就开始用 dome 这个字来指圆顶。我们也顺便来学一下 dom 这个字根的语义。其实 dom 它有这个房屋、房舍的意思。那以下会介绍两个带有这个字根的单字。第一个介绍的是 domestic， 它的字根 dom 表示房屋，字尾 ic 是形容词字尾。domestic 就是用来形容家庭的，或者是可以形容国内的、本国的。那第二个补充的是 domicile， 它的字根 dom 表示房屋，ICILE 这部分表示居住，合在一起 domicile 就是表达住处、住所。那这个单字主要是法律用字，像我们说 report one's change of domicile 就是表达通报更改住所的意思。好，那么同样在课文第二部分最后一句，它有提到这种设计能够以最少的材料和重量来获得最大的强度和表面积。文中它有用到 minimal 来描述最少的，我们也来补充一下它的字根。好，看到 min 或者是 mini 这一类字根带有小的意思。像 minimal 这个字呢，它的字根 minim 表示小， al 是形容词字尾，那合在一起 minimal 就是表达极少的、极小的、最小的。如果把这个字尾 al 改成最高级形容词字尾 um， 会得到 minimum， 那就表示最小的、最低限度的。我们顺便补充几个有这一类字根的单字。第一个补充的是 diminish，它的字首 di 是源自于字首 de 的变形，在这边表达完全，那么用来做强调用。而它的字根 min 表示小， ish 是动词字尾，合在一起 diminish 就是表达减少啊、缩减或降低的意思，就跟 decrease、lessen、reduce 意思差不多。那第二个补充的是 minister， 它的字根 mini 表示小的， ster 表示人，合在一起啊，它的字面意思是小的人、地位低下的人，也就是仆人、侍者。那么后来这个字被借来指大臣，因为大臣其实就蛮像是这个帝王的侍者，所以从这边可以去联想到 minister 它有大臣或部长的意思咯。好，那以上今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Artificial. The park uses artificial grass instead of real grass to save water. Enormous. The elephant is an enormous animal that weighs several tons. Regulate. My grandfather takes a pill to regulate his blood pressure. Dome. Up above, the branches of the trees domed the path and offered shade to those walking beneath. Maximum. The maximum capacity of the elevator is 8 people. Minimal. The room's design is very simple, with minimal furniture. Innovative. Malcolm presented an innovative solution to the problem that impressed everyone.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. The question is, which of the examples of biomimetic architecture mentioned in the article would you most like to visit and why?
Because I live in Taiwan, which is a hot country, I'd be most interested in traveling to see Council House 2 in Melbourne, Australia. How they use a termite mound's design to cool it off, I think would be very interesting. I would love to know more about that.
That sounds very interesting, and I certainly will check that out, but I'd most like to visit the Eden Project in Cornwall, England. I think it would be interesting to see because I like plants and I like domes, plus I also have always been interested in that part of England. I've heard of towns like Penzance and Mousel and places like that. I'd like to definitely check them out after I check out those domes.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.